Welcome back to the Wealth and Purpose podcast, where we help families thrive by connecting wealth and purpose. I'm your host, Brady Fineske, president of TFO Wealth Partners. And today I'm thrilled to welcome a guest whose voice is reshaping the conversation around legacy, wealth, and what it means to truly flourish across generations. David York is a respected estate planning attorney, CPA, and co-founder of a thought leadership platform, COREnology, which explores the core truths that shape lasting legacies. He's also a sought-after speaker and author of insightful books, including Entrusted, Building a Legacy That Lasts, and The Gift of Lift. David has a unique ability to bring heart, purpose, and clarity in the conversations that too often focus on taxes and structures. So whether you're building a family enterprise, stewarding generational wealth, or simply reshaping what success looks like, David brings us perspective that will challenge, inspire, and most importantly, equip you to help you going forward and to help your family. So David, welcome to the show. It's a true pleasure to have you with us today.
I'm glad to be here and been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, we got off to a rocky start the first time there. It's our first episode that we haven't done in studio, that we've done over the internet. So it helps to actually have internet service. Our first run wasn't too good. Our internet wasn't working that day. So we appreciate your patience and welcome you back to the show.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm looking forward to it, and been bit by technology more than once myself.
Yeah,
so I understand.
Exactly. Well, we're ready to roll here. So maybe we start with just sharing a little bit about the story or the reasoning behind you writing the book Entrusted.
I've been practicing in estate planning for 28 years now. My background, I was a CPA. When I came into estate planning, I really looked at it on a transactional basis with a focus on give me your names and birth dates and names of your kids and how much what your assets are, and I can design an estate plan for you. It was very structure driven, and it was based on mitigating tax, protecting assets, dealing with succession and control, all great things. But it wasn't too long into practice when I started to see some of the issues and negative effects of inherited wealth. I saw heirs stripped of purpose. I saw families fighting. I saw dysfunction. I saw the consumption of wealth. And I started to see a lot of the negative effects. And so about 10 years ago, my partner and I looked at this and we said, look, instead of trying to treat dysfunction, what are the habits and characteristics of those families that actually successfully transfer wealth? So similar to like a positive psychology standpoint, what are the behaviors? What are the principles? What are the disciplines of those that actually successfully transfer wealth? And how do we replicate that? And that's what the book Entrusted was. We identified really 7 things that we saw as a through line. And that's what we wanted to capture.
Well, it's awesome because, so many of us often in the business will reference that William Group study about how, 90%, 97, whatever the number is now that don't successfully transfer down the wealth to the next generation. And you took the opposite approach, almost as if like in medicine, it would be more of preventative or wellness type approach to this process. And I think that's awesome. When we think about those 7 things that were in the book, are there any that kind of jump out to you? Is there any that are they're all important, but anything that kind of jumps out at you as the most important of those 7 things?
Have you ever seen those demotivator posters? They're like the opposite of the motivational posters. There's like...
You miss the shots you don't take, those things?
Well, no, they're actually like mistakes, for, maybe the point of your life is to be a warning to everyone else. It's kind of the opposite of the motivational. But one of my favorites is there's a picture of a snowflake, and it says, just like a snowflake, you're unique, just like everybody else. And the point is,
don't be a snowflake.
Well, the reality is we all are unique and we're all different, but that's kind of what makes us the same. And as we looked at these families, it's easy from a surface standpoint to see the differences. But what we found was there were through lines. There were things that were actually the same about all of these families. The number one thing that families that successfully transfer wealth have in common is that they know who they are, what they value, and what they believe.
Mm.
They have a clear sense of identity and a clear sense of purpose. And then that drives everything else that they did. They have the elevator speech for the why of their wealth.
Mm.
And what we found lacking in the vast majority of the families that unsuccessfully transfer wealth is there was no purpose, there was no meaning, there was no vision.
Mm.
And that was the defining characteristic. And you see that's the same is true in business, right? All of business is a collection of individuals. Family is a collection of individuals. There's a lack of volition in family. You choose who you work with, not who you're related to.
Yeah.
But the concept's the same. If you have clarity of the why of your wealth and the who of your wealth, then everything else falls into place.
Well, and back to the negative poster. I mean, if we aren't the ones, or someone in the family isn't the one that teaches it to them, that explains to them, that goes through a process of developing it, someone else will, right? Whether that's someone on the bus, whether that's someone on the internet, if we don't do it, someone else will, right? And so I think that, as you said, a through line among these families is they've taken the time and the effort to do it. Not just how we're going to get the wealth down to the next generation, right? It just seems like so much of the time we're focused on, as you said, give me your names, your dates of birth, and you're going to draft a plan that passes that wealth down. But oftentimes we don't teach them how to use it, or even teach them how to build it themselves, right? And I know you've thought about that a lot. But any thoughts on that process of teaching our kids how to actually use it? I know my fifth grader, we gave her a little green light card. And I realized when she went to go get ice cream, I said, use your green light card. She's like, I don't physically didn't know how to actually use the credit card. And it's like, what are we teaching our kids about money if we're not teaching them that, let alone how to build it themselves? So any thoughts on that concept?
Yeah, I find so much of new wealth is just, or new wisdom is just old wisdom that we've forgotten. If you go back 3,000, 4,000 years, you look at the Talmud, and you look at what one generation's responsibility was to the next. It taught that each generation is responsible to teach the next generation God's word, to give them a skill or ability. And then this is my favorite one, to teach them how to swim. In other words, it's the responsibility that each generation has to the next is to give them a sense of who they are and what they value in the world, to give them the ability to care for and provide and take care of themselves, and to survive and thrive in the world. And what we've done is we've turned it into, how do I take my financial resources and transfer those to the next generation? And we spend so much time preparing wealth for children and not near enough time preparing children for wealth.
Yeah.
I think part of this is a reformation movement that I'm seeing of people saying, okay, the why and the who is far more important than the what and the how. But if we have the why of our wealth, we understand and develop the who, the successive generation, then the how and the what become easy.
Yeah.
In fact, it's interesting. I sometimes I ask my clients, if your wealth transfer strategy were a business, would you invest in it? I had a lot of clients be like, no, I wouldn't invest in this business. It's got no clear purpose. It's got no clear business plan. It's got no intention.
Right. Nobody's on the same page. Right.
Exactly. And then I have to break it to them. You're currently 100% invested in your wealth transfer strategy. Like you have all of your money in it.
Yeah. Well, that's super interesting. And I've heard you talk about, kind of this transition from what a lot of times is a fear-based planning model where we're worried about taxes, we're worried about the issue with the one son or whatever it might be, in this fear-based model compared to more of an opportunity-based planning model. So how does COREnology, the tool that you guys have developed, how does COREnology act as a buffer or a tool that can help get us from more fear-based over to that opportunity-based planning?
Again, what we recognize, the first two disciplines that these families had in common is that they had a sense of identity. They knew who they were, and that often came from their core values. They could articulate, here are the core values that we have as individuals and as families, and here's how we're going to resource those values. Here's how we're going to put our time, our talent, our treasure into those values. And then they focused on development uh, of that next generation to be prepared for wealth. And so, the mystical discovery is that it's about why and who. But the reality is, as I'm sitting here going through this, I'm like, I don't know what I value. And could I articulate those things? And so we developed COREnology as a tool to allow individuals, families, even businesses to articulate those core values that they have. We can value anything. We can't value everything.
Right.
And so what are those things that we're going to focus our intention and our direction into and use that as the rubric for our wealth? And that's what COREnology does. And then it also actually creates metrics for the culture of a family. So if we develop the why, let's also develop the who. And how are we doing from a cultural standpoint? Because every family has culture, just like you have two or more people, you have culture. So we wanted to create metrics so that we could measure and improve that as well. So we wanted to bring some methodology to these principles of why and who.
Well, and anything you can measure and have metrics on creates accountability, and accountability breeds responsibility. And here we go, right? We're off to the races.
Exactly.
But as you think about that measurement, that tool, does a family story, does an outcome kind of come to mind that this tool really did help this family? Because it's always hard, what do you value? Here's a blank sheet of paper, but the process of prompting them through that and delivering an outcome. What's an example of that? Is there one that comes to mind for you, a story or an outcome that really sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, we've had so many, but one example, we worked with a family and developing these core values, and it was for their family office, but same principle. And they said, look, we want to be known for three things. We want to be known for loyalty with each other and with those that we work with. We want to be marked by integrity. And then we want everything we do to be done with excellence. So loyalty, integrity, excellence. Now, unfortunately, the acronym was LIE. So set that aside. But yeah, that afternoon, we were sitting down and they were looking at a potential investment they wanted to make. And it looked good on a balance sheet. It cash flowed, but it was kind of geographically remote. It was going to take a lot of work and effort. It needed some real time and attention. And they had a lot of other things going on. So they were hemming and hawing on this decision for months. And I said, let me ask you this. Can you do this project, make this investment, and do it with excellence? And they said, done. We're not doing the deal.
Yeah.
They said, yeah, we could make some money on it. Yeah, it could turn out, but we can't do it with the excellence that we want to be known for. So what was 3 months of hemming and hawing became a 3-second decision once they built and understood their values. And that principle is the same with a family. Again, everyone has limited resources. So where do we want to apply our resources? If a family knows what their core values are, and then they take those resources and apply it to it, that intentionality is going to bear out those values that they're resourcing.
Yep. And we do it all day, every day in our businesses, but do we do it in our family, right? And so this tool, COREnology, helps prompt that within a family, allows the advisor or the family to go through a series of exercises to reflect and then measure if I'm following right. But, also I think, this concept of kind of naming it. I mean, I jokingly, we said that one stands for LIE, but I've heard you say kind of naming the core and be able to have something that we can point back to in these moments of crisis, difficulty, or just in good times to keep it going generationally. Is that how you'd frame that up as an outcome of the tool, kind of getting to the naming of that core and having a structure to follow in those decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so critical for families. And again, it's the tyranny of the urgent. Like you said, we're really intentional at work, and then we come home and we have lessons and sports and homework and chores and all of these other things, and they're all so consuming. But if we can look back with a value lens, it really helps us order and direct those things. And we've had a lot of clients, again, take that right into their estate planning. So we have a lot of clients who value connection. They want to stay connected with each other as the family grows and develops. And so we actually set aside resources so that not just now, but multi-generationally, they can set aside funds for annual family trips or annual family reunions or to maintain a legacy property.
Yep.
It's not because we value vacation,
Right.
It's because we value connection and we want to resource those values. And then it lets us also help us understand our kids' values and how we can help them resource their own values. And that's, I think, the biggest thing we've seen in the metrics that we used for culture and families. Families are actually doing far better in communication, cohesion than you might think. Where younger generations are struggling is that identity and impact. Who am I? What do I value? What do I believe? And how do I use my values to make decisions? And then what's the impact or difference I'm going to make in the world? That's where people are really struggling. And that's why we do those metrics so we can say, okay, here's where we want to put our effort.
Yeah. Well, and it leads to the next question and kind of segues. You may have already answered it, but what are some blind spots that these families have? And the one that kind of came to me as you were describing that was, great, we do this within our family, and then 2 years later, my son marries a girl, and her values are different. How do you deal with in-laws? How do families take what we've developed here with COREnology? They feel good about their mission and their vision, their values, their framework. They're looking at everything through a lens, and then all of a sudden that lens needs to be communicated to someone that isn't directly part of the family, someone new. How do you deal with that? Have you dealt with that? And what's the pitfall here that we might experience as in-laws come in play?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And the reality is healthy systems grow. Whether it's a business, whether it's a family, they naturally grow. When you and your wife got married, you were a family, right? But that family has grown. And hopefully, as a healthy family, it continues to grow. And one of the unique things about in-laws is that they come into a movie an hour in.
Yeah,
right. They haven't sat through the first part. Or, do you ever watch a movie and you're like, why does this character act this way? Why do they do this? And then they have a flashback scene of some seminal moment, and then it explains that person.
Right.
And so what's interesting about our core values is that we found that they come from two places. One is they're just how we were made. Just from the very beginning of life, we loved creativity. We loved art. We were determined. We loved justice. But a lot of our core values come from life experience. They come from story. We value integrity because we dealt with someone who lacked integrity. Mm-hmm. We value generosity because in a difficult time, someone was generous with us. Those stories may be known within the family, but too often they're not shared. And when a new person comes in, they have their own life experience. So by sharing the values, oftentimes it leads to the stories. And I think one of the other trappings we have in culture today is that we're all about data and information. Give me data, give me information.
Fast.
What we really need is we need questions and we need stories, because that's where we actually lead to understanding. We went through this process with a family once, and we always invite the in-laws whenever we can because they're part of the family. And we went through this and went through just the values of each person in the family. And I had a son-in-law come to me afterwards, and he said, I learned more about this family in 3 hours of talking about values than in 10 years of being married in.
Yeah.
And you have the same issue. You have an in-law that you don't know either. So that in-law needs to understand you, but you need to understand them. And we find a values construct is a great way to get to know people.
Yeah. Questions and stories. This sounds pretty basic, but, oftentimes harder to do, to take the time to set aside the time to do that within a family. But, I think that's a great takeaway. And maybe a final question for you as we kind of think through this would be, if a family's just starting out on this journey, they're listening today and they're saying, yeah, we need to do that. We haven't done that. We haven't had a family meeting. We haven't gone through that process. What are a few kind of small but powerful steps that they could take after listening to today that would put them on the right course for that?
Yeah, one is I think we need to get out of the false notion that we need a certain level of wealth to leave a legacy or leave an impact. And I see a lot of people that, I don't have that much money. I once had a client worth $70 million tell me, I don't have that much money compared to someone else, right?
Right.
We play this relative game of, if I had money, then I'd be generous, or if I had money, then I would provide a legacy for my kids, or I would talk intentionally. The reality is we'll all leave a legacy. Legacies aren't optional,
Right.
and legacies are the impact that we have on others. And so it's a responsibility, but it's also an opportunity. And so I think what we need to realize is one of the best things we can pass to our kids is our stories,
Yeah.
our failures, our successes, our hopes, our dreams, those kind of things that made us who we are. I knew growing up my dad was poor. I had no idea until much later in life how poor he was. And it really gave me a different perspective on him and a level of appreciation for what I had because of what he did, because of what he didn't have. And so I think first and foremost, we need to be willing to share those stories. Kids want to actually hear those stories. They may not act like it always, but they do. And then again, regardless of the amount of wealth we have, how do we deal with it intentionally? How do we take this? And a lot of my clients, what we do is we focus, you mentioned this earlier, from how much wealth do I leave at death to how wealthy can I help my children become during life?
Mm-hmm.
How do I help leverage their own work and effort by helping them buy a house, helping them start a business, helping them invest in the market or in real estate? Not to give children things other than opportunities, because at the end of the day, we value things based on what they cost us. And one of the biggest misnomers I see is that I think $1 I earned is going to be worth $1 to my children. It's not. But if I can help my children earn $1, and I can max or leverage their work or effort, that's going to be much more of a lasting impact than what you leave to your kids as an inheritance that they probably won't get till they're 60.
Right. Yeah. I in talking with you prior, you mentioned something about I think you said we build these 747 planes, but we forget to teach them how to fly it.
Yeah.
Right? And you've built this structure and this wealth, and you've got it all set up to be passed down, but then you forget to teach the kids how to fly the plane and how to build the wealth themselves and to transfer the responsibilities you spoke about to the next generation as well. And so I think it speaks to the value of taking some time, setting it aside, going deep, asking questions. And I think, as we know within our practice, COREnology is a tool that helps a family do that, right? It's a framework of which that can allow them to have those deeper conversations, to formulate that structure that's needed, and give a family an opportunity to talk about it, to get better. And so I think that's great. And we're so grateful for what you've done in building it and sharing it with our clients and our firm. But for anyone listening today that's interested in COREnology or going through that process, you can visit us at tfowealth.com. Also, if you're interested in a copy of David's books, either book, we'll provide a link to those at our description section of this episode on our YouTube channel. So you can check that out there and be sure to subscribe to the show there. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. David, thank you for sharing. I'm glad we had internet working this time. Thank you for sharing all of that. And
anytime.
We look forward to our future interactions. So thanks again for being here.
Anytime. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on the Wealth and Purpose podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like this video, leave us a comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform. If you're inspired to connect your wealth and purpose further, or want to learn more about our firm, please visit our website at tfowealth.com and start a conversation with our team today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.